In this new PC build video, I will show you my favorite PC build on the market right now, and I will explain why throughout the video, so it's really important for you to watch the whole thing if you want to understand on why this PC build is actually my favorite and it's really affordable. So if you have a budget between $950 to $1,200, this video is going to be for you, because at the end of the video I will explain on how to make this PC cheaper, but also how to make it more expensive so you gain extra performance. With that being said, let's start with this one. For the CPU, I actually thought about 3 different CPUs and I ended up going with the AMD Ryzen 5 5600X. The reason why I picked this over the 12400 is because this one is actually better for streaming and the price for the motherboards are cheaper. If you want to get the i5 12400 or 12400F, totally fine. They are really similar in performance and you won't notice any difference. So the 12400 or 12400F are both great CPUs as well to consider if you're willing to spend more money on the motherboard. One recommendation for you is that if you pick the i5 12400 or 12400F, you should go for the 12400 if you're into content creation. Then for the CPU cooler, I went with the ID Cooling SE214XT. This one is a great RGB CPU cooler. This whole build is going to be micro ATX with RGB, so if you're into RGB, this build is great for you, and if you're not, don't worry about it, because you can take out the RGB fans and replace the RAM that I will talk about to make your PC actually cheaper if you don't want any RGB. For the motherboard, I went with the MSI B550M Pro. This one has Wi-Fi included. It's $110, which is a decent price, and it has great expandability because you can put that Ryzen 7 5800X 3D in the future if you want to upgrade it. Then for the memory kit, I went with the CORSAIR RGB Pro SL 16GB of RAM 2x8. This one is a 3200MHz CL16 memory kit. It's going to work great with this build, and the price is $73, which is a little bit expensive for 16GB of RAM, but you get that beautiful RGB and it's going to work wonders with this build. But you can save up some money on the RAM as well. That's what I will explain at the end of the video. For the storage, I went with the Samsung 970 EVO Plus 1TB of M.2 SSD, $99. This is standard for gamers nowadays. You can also go with 2TB if you're into content creation, video editing, and all of that stuff. It's going to consume you a lot of storage. Now, I don't think Gen 4 SSD is worth it right now, especially if you're a gamer, so do not get Gen 4 SSD unless you're really serious about transferring files and video editing. Then for the graphics card and the most important part of this build, I picked the MSI RADEON RX 6700 XT with 12GB of VRAM for $430. Now, I picked AMD over Nvidia because the closest thing to this one is the RTX 3060 Ti at $470 or somewhere around that, so you end up spending 50 extra bucks for a graphics card that's really similar in performance. In some games the AMD is going to win, in other games the RTX 3060 Ti is going to be the winner, but you should keep in mind that this Radeon has 12GB of VRAM compared to the 8GB of VRAM for the 3060 Ti, which for right now is not going to make a difference for gaming, but maybe in the future it will, and the performance for right now is really similar and this one is cheaper. That's why I picked AMD over Nvidia. But if you want to go for the 3060 Ti, feel free to do this, it's totally fine. Both of these graphics cards are going to be great for 1440p gaming and also 1080p, so this build is designed for 1440p gaming, 1080p super high-end gaming as well. Then for the case, I went with the DEEPCOOL MATREXX 40 with 3 fans installed. I always pick this one because of the price, $72, and you get all of the fans installed, beautiful RGB, and the airflow is pretty decent, so that is going to get the job done. And last but not least, the power supply. I went with a 650W 80 plus gold power supply from EFGA for $60, which is a really decent price, and it's going to work great with this build, but also future upgradability. Now, if you want to get the 3090 Ti down the line, then I would recommend you going with at least a 750W 80 plus gold power supply, and I would even recommend an 851. If you want to upgrade the CPU or even the graphics card to the 3080, let's say, or even the graphics card to the 3070 Ti, let's say, this 650W power supply is going to be more than enough. So the total price it's $1,041, and this is my favorite PC build mainly because you get excellent 1080p and 1440p performance at a really decent price. You get that 6700 XT with the Ryzen 5 5600X. Honestly, a great combination, and I would recommend you searching your favorite game and the benchmarks for this CPU GPU combination if you want to see the exact FPS that it's going to get for different settings at your favorite game. But let me tell you that for 1080p high refresh rate is more than enough, and it's also more than enough for 1440p high refresh rate depending on the game and depending on the settings. But every single game at 1440p is going to be run smoothly at least 60 FPS on average. With that being said, that's why it's my favorite. And now I'll show you how to make this PC cheaper in case you have a lower budget, but also how to make it more expensive. First, we're going to start with how to make this PC cheaper, and the first thing that you want to do is to not install any CPU cooler. The Ryzen 5 5600X come with the AMD stock cooler, which is really decent, especially for this type of CPU, so you don't really need a CPU cooler. But if you want a more quiet experience and overall better cooling and a better looking PC with RGB, the CPU cooler is going to be a really good option at just $20. But if you're on a tight budget, take it out, it's not going to hurt your performance. And the other thing that you want to replace is the RAM, and go with the Silicon Power 16 gigs of RAM, dual channel of course. This means that it has 2 sticks of 8 gigs. DDR4 3200MHz CL16 memory is basically the same as the other one, but it just doesn't look as good, and the price is $47, so you end up saving a bunch of money there, and the total price will be $995. And the performance for the PC is going to be exactly the same, even for 1440p 1080p, so don't feel bad about downgrading if you're on a tight budget. Now, if you have even a lower budget than $995, totally understandable, then you should downgrade the GPU to the RX 6650 XT for $40 cheaper. And yes, you will get worse performance, but again, 6650 XT is definitely more than enough for 1080p gaming. Now, if you're really into 1440p or you want to upgrade that monitor, have the best performance, I do not recommend you going for this graphics card. I do recommend you staying with the 6700 XT. However, this graphics card is great for the price, and even for 1440p, it's going to be a nice budget GPU. But if you want to get that next level of 1440p, I do not recommend you doing this downgrade. And if you even have a lower budget than this, I do recommend you downgrading the power supply to something cheaper, let's say a 600 or even a 550 watt 80 plus cold power supply. It's going to cost you a little less, but you're not going to save a bunch of money. And also, this power supply has a great price, and I do not recommend you doing that. But if you have a lower budget and you want to save the maximum amount of money that you can save, this is a nice downgrade to do as well. On the other hand, if you have a higher budget, I recommend you going for the RX 6800 instead of the 6700 XT. You will get a better performance, and this graphics card is also great for 4K gaming. So if you really want to do 4K gaming on a budget, the RX 6800 is going to be the best choice for you. Now, if you're an Nvidia fan, then go for the 3070 Ti or the 3080. I'd recommend the 3080, but if you're in a tight budget, the 3070 Ti is going to get the job done. But these graphics cards are more expensive, and they are not going to offer a much better performance for the price, and that's why I went with the 6800 for you to save money. But if you really want to go with Nvidia, that's your money, and that's totally cool. The total price will be $1190 with this upgrade, and then for the other components, I recommend you getting the same, and the performance will improve by a lot, especially at 4K gaming. So that was my whole PC build. If you found it helpful, leave a like and subscribe, but most importantly, hit that bell button so you get notified when I upload this type of content. And if you're looking for a Prebuilt PC, I will leave a video about it in the top right of the screen for different budgets, and you will have different gaming PCs as well for your budget down below in the description as well with this PC build. Thank you guys for watching, thank you for the support, and I will see you on the next one.